Hi there, it's Sarah here from BJC Health, coming to you from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for showing an interest in one of our educational events. You're about to watch part one, so enjoy the event. If you've got any questions about the content, then please consider joining BJC Connect, where you can access all of our facilitators live. Otherwise, please consider leaving a comment and we'll do our best to get back to you.
All right, so I'm going to just start with a few quotes because I hope some of these might resonate with some of you. And when we think about why pacing might be important and, why is it something that both me and Belinda spend quite a bit of time in our consultations talking about, it's because of examples like this. And you might have your own version of this. I'll just give you a chance to read this one. But, that pressure to clean the house, get the groceries done, really trying to maximize those days you might feel good. But then there's consequences. And I think some of the language in these quotes you might resonate with as well. And that sort of feeling of really paying for things, or feeling like your body's really fighting against you, or that mind versus body, argument that can happen where your mind might be willing, but the body is giving you some feedback that it doesn't want to keep doing what you're doing. So that's one. Another one, these are all come from clients that I've worked with. When I have a good day, go into, what feels like superhuman mode, trying to clean the house, catch up on the laundry, tackling all the chores that have piled up. But again, the word crash is often used. I'm sure Belle's heard this a few times too. And then again, it can be very frustrating because you might not be able to then do anything for a few days. And you really have this prolonged recovery period, which can then be very disruptive and very frustrating. And it can feel like a vicious cycle, which again can be very frustrating and annoying, and part of what can make managing your health a bit difficult. And then final one, again, because I think one disclaimer, I guess I want to talk about pacing. It is a good concept. I think it's a great technique, but there are times where you're not going to be able to use it, or you're going to want to help someone out, or something pops up that's unexpected, and then you're going to feel compelled to push yourself, and that's okay. But I think moving furniture around a house could be a good example of something which can then be pretty tricky, and it's amazing. Sometimes our body can really power through things on a particular day. But then afterwards, again, we might suffer, might not be able to get out of bed. And again, that can just bring, a whole range of different feelings that can be pretty challenging to navigate, especially on your own. So again, they're just three. I had heaps when I was thinking about what are some examples, and I asked the team as well, if they had some examples of other ways that it can be difficult for their patients to pace themselves. So if you've got some examples yourself, please feel free to pop them in the chat. I think, again, it's helpful to, share your experiences with those on the call tonight. Okay, so why are we talking about pacing? So this is a slide from another talk. We did a talk specifically about fatigue. And so many of the clients we work with have an inflammatory condition or some kind of chronic condition where fatigue is part and parcel of navigating that condition. And fatigue is multifactorial. So this slide talks to, again, not every single thing, but a few of the things that can impact someone's fatigue levels. We're not going to go through all of these tonight because we did go through that more extensively in another talk. Zaki will share the link. If you haven't watched that, that might be another one that's good to watch over the holidays. But I think pacing can definitely help with these three sections. It can help with pain. It can help with your mental health and how you might manage stress and feelings of frustration. And it can also help combat against this deconditioning or this physical deconditioning that we often see in our clients, which I'll explain a little bit more in a sec. But we're not going to go through all of the other parts of fatigue. So what do we mean when we talk about the word pacing? So again, if you're here tonight, you might have heard the term before, might have done some of your own research. And again, there's lots of definitions. There's not one that rules them all. These are just a few that I thought I'd like to share tonight. And I've highlighted the words that I think are particularly powerful. So it's a strategy. It's not a passive treatment. This is something that takes planning, it's strategy, but it's really there to help you balance your activity and rest, to help you manage your symptoms. It's also a behavioral approach. So again, it's really important, and pacing very much is related to behaviors. And when it comes to changing behaviors, that's really hard, no matter what the behavior is. So whether it's doing a little bit less or being open to doing something in a different way, changing our behaviors or accepting that we might need to make some changes to how we do things can be very difficult. But again, it's a concept, or it's an approach that we think can help you manage things a bit better. And really the whole point is to help you be consistently, or at least a little bit more consistently, engaged in things that are meaningful to you. And I think that's, one of the best goals there is. It's a process. So again, it's not something you can just hear tonight once and just do it without planning and actually applying some of the concepts that we talk about. And it's a self-management technique. So I like pacing so much is that out of all the different things we talk about in these webinars and in our consults, some of them do require you to get professional help and go and talk to someone. You might need some hands-on treatment to help you manage aches and pains, but pacing is really something you can learn how to do yourself, which I think is very powerful. And definitely it can be very hard living with a chronic condition. And although it's important to have a team of professionals that you feel support you and help you, it's also can be really empowering to make sure you have some tricks up your sleeve yourself. And I think pacing is one of the most important tricks we can teach you. So again, there's more benefits to this. Like I'm really trying to pitch what we're going to talk about. But these are some of the benefits in the literature and the research that we think pacing can help with. So again, fatigue being a big one, helping to prevent flare-ups. So I think pacing is both a management strategy, but it's also a good preventative strategy. So if you're wanting to sort of do things to try and prevent, flaring up or big changes in your symptoms, pacing can help. Improving functional capacity. So functional capacity is just a fancy way of describing how much you can do. And the word functional tends to represent things that we all just need to do, take a shower, lift some things, cook some things, functional tasks. And although we all have different lives and we have different work lives, what's functional for myself might be different to you, but being able to function within your world and within your communities, obviously something that's really important to work towards, and pacing can help with that. Again, this word conditioning comes up. You think it can help with well-being, can help with recovery, can help you work towards goals that you might have. It tends to be a more sustainable way you can work towards improving your symptoms and your strength. And I think number 10 is important too. Not easy to learn just again in one lecture, but I think as a process, if you're open to learning how to pace and listening to your body, I think it really is a great strategy that helps you develop your mind-body awareness, which again is something very important when I think for everyone, but particularly if you've got a chronic condition. And I love this picture because again, I think all of us need tips and tools to help us manage our health, and pacing is just one tool. Okay, so it doesn't mean if you pace yourself well, you're going to be fine 100% of the time. But I think it's a good thing to have an understanding of and feel that you've got some awareness and knowledge around. And so hopefully by the end of tonight, you feel the same. Okay, so one of the things we talked about in the email or the intro for tonight was this boom-bust cycle. And in those examples I shared, that theme comes through a little bit too. And this graph tries to represent why, if you're constantly existing in a boom-bust kind of way, eventually and in the long term, that's not going to be great for your capacity. You're probably not going to feel very good. And over time, unfortunately, this booming, which is, if you feel good, you want to get a lot of things done, which is obviously understandable, but then you flare, so you need to recover. Over time, what we find is that people gradually start doing less and less because it's painful and it's very frustrating. So it's very understandable, especially if how you're responding to different activities has changed since your diagnosis, or maybe you've gone through a change in medication, which is impacting your ability to do things. So this is always somewhat in a state of flux, but over time, generally, if you're in this boom bust phase of getting through your life, your ability to just do things diminishes, which that's not great for any of us. And so although all of us have different meaningful things that we want to be able to do, a number of those things will often require your body and some energy. So whether it is cooking a meal, whether it is being able to babysit some children, whether it's work related, all of those things do require energy of some description. And so if your tolerance over time is continuing to reduce, just means your options also reduce. And that can also be quite depressing, it can be frustrating, and also start to impact your mental health as well. So again, if this resonates with you, if you're like, yes, I've been there, maybe you're on the other side of that, please share. If you know there's particular things where you might find it really difficult to avoid booming and busting, again, please feel free to share, because it can be really helpful to know there's other people that go through a similar thing. I wanted to talk about tissue tolerance. So this is something that us clinicians will talk about a little bit, but I think it's definitely a concept that once you understand can take a lot of the anxiety and maybe frustration away when our body doesn't always do what we would like it to do. So when I say tissue, in this instance tonight, I mean muscles, tendons, even your joints, the fascia, the connective tissue, mostly the soft squishy bits around our body, but definitely can still involve our joints. And all of us at any given point have a tolerance to be able to do things. Okay, so, and this tolerance for different things could be how long we can stand for. Okay, I might have a particular tolerance of 60 minutes. Some other people, it might be 5 minutes. You might have a particular tolerance for how much you can lift, how many hours you can work. So it just talks about how much can your tissue safely cope with at the moment. So tissue tolerance is not fixed. And although when you see a clinician, or you might be doing some reading and some research, we might do some tests to help figure out what your tolerance is. It's not this thing that doesn't change. And so I think although it can be very hard if you've gone through a period of being unwell or getting a new diagnosis, just please remember that your tissues never lose their ability to change. They never lose their capacity to adapt when we give it good stuff. So that can be very helpful. But all of us have a set tissue tolerance. And why definitely us clinicians, and definitely I'm sure some of you also want to avoid that boom bust cycle, is because we know that over time, if you decrease how much activity you're doing, either due to pain, for whatever reason, your tissue tolerance becomes lower. Now, this doesn't happen straight away. Not talking about, missing a session one day, or maybe modifying what you're doing to help you navigate your symptoms. But I'll go through some, I guess they're not particularly fun facts, but there's some facts that are important to know that, say, if you do pick up a virus, or if you've been unwell for a couple of weeks, that's going to impact your ability to do things. So then if you try and launch back into doing the housework or your chores after being unwell at the same rate, you might find it doesn't go quite so well. So understanding tissue tolerance is important. And so this deconditioning cycle, we often see it unfortunately in people with different chronic illnesses, because being diagnosed and like I said, sometimes changing medication, having a flare-up changes your ability to do certain things. So you might have previously thought, yes, you could go for a bike ride for 30 minutes and it's not an issue, but on some days that might not be the case. But what we really want to work towards avoiding is just stopping everything. And some of you might have tried that in the past. And I've definitely at different times for short periods encouraged, clients to take a good rest and to just ease off things. But in the long term, just stopping doing things is not great, because then your tissue tolerance, like the previous slide went through, becomes lower. And then it's easier for your symptoms then to be exacerbated, which can again get that cycle going, which can become very frustrating to manage. So here are some, like I said, not so fun facts, but I think important to go through so that, again, you can understand and be kind to yourself. Perhaps the next time you do need to take a break, or let's say with Christmas coming up, you're like, you know what, I'm going on a cruise, or I've got, a good trip planned, but in just 7 to 10 days of inactivity, strength in some of your weight-bearing muscles can drop by 20 to 30%. That is just so unfair. So I've always reticent to share this because, like, man, that really sucks. So your weight-bearing muscles are the big juicy ones. So things like your quadriceps, which are the muscles on the top of your thigh, your glutes, so they're the big muscles around your hips that help you go upstairs and walk and do all sorts of good things. So they can change very quickly. And so think, again, if you've had a flare-up in your condition, or you've picked up an illness and you've needed to really rest for 7 days, you're going to have lost some muscle strength. Okay. And there's not really anything you can do about it. Okay. But again, when you're starting to feel better and you want to re-engage in some things, all the more reason to hopefully remember to pace yourself. And another one, 2 weeks of inactivity, you can lose actual muscle mass. So strength and the actual sheer size of your muscles are two different things. We kind of want both. So it's good to have a healthy amount of muscle mass, and that becomes particularly important as we age. So knowing that, again, it only takes a week or two for that to start to change by 10%. Again, I know that might seem, again, unfair and a bit, don't mind if you feel a bit ripped off hearing that, but all the more reason where we're always trying to help maintain some kind of consistency with movement so that we can avoid big losses in your strength if possible. Okay, so Belle, I might hand over to you just quickly. So we're going to then now go into step-by-step approach of how to actually pace yourself. But Belle, is there anything you wanted to add? Did you want to summarize anything that's come up on the chat? Anything you particularly want to discuss now?
A few people have shared some really good stories about their struggles or how they manage with their activities. Do you want me to share some patient stories or what we see commonly in the clinic? Yeah, I guess commonly in the clinic, you might rest for a period of time, or you might have knee pain. Let's say you rest for a period of time. You go, oh, my pain's really, reduced. I'm walking so much better. I can do stairs now and I don't have pain. And then because you feel better, you then go out and walk for a whole day. You think you're ready for a whole day out where, and you haven't done that for maybe 3 months, 6 months. And unfortunately, for us as practitioners, we understand that your body just hasn't done that for 3 to 6 months. So going from no walking to a full day of walking because you felt better for a few days is just a bit too much. And that stuff like that is stuff we see commonly. Another one, a good one I thought of just now, just as Sarah was talking, it's obviously, coming towards summer, everyone's garden is booming, and gardening tends to be a really difficult activity, I think, for many of us to pace, because it's hard to just, cut half the tree down or cut half the shrub or, things like that. And once you get into it, it's quite enjoyable. People like to keep going. But unfortunately, doing 3 hours of gardening for a lot of people is just going to be too much, because it's often an activity that is quite heavy. It's very repetitive and can put a lot of stress on your back, your neck, your shoulder, many different joints perhaps. So another activity that commonly, I guess, people tend to struggle with pacing.
Yeah, we should have a whole talk on gardening, I think. And hearing you say cut the shrub, Belle hasn't quite reached her gardening era yet. I am in my gardening era. And I definitely
prune the shrub.
I definitely go, at the moment it's all about the veggies, trying to get the veggies growing, and it is so difficult. And you want to complete things because, we all feel so good by completing things, or you set yourself a task to finish while the weather's good or whilst you feel good. So the gardening, I definitely feel for people. It's a very challenging environment to remember these things, but it can be something that brings a lot of joy. So again, that's where we would both, if you were, we're going to talk about aims and sort of working towards some goals. Gardening's important to you. If you love that, you want to keep doing it, it's definitely within our best interest as practitioners to help you keep doing the things that you want to do. I'm always very keen, and you don't often have to justify why you like doing things. It's like, if these are the things that are important to you, then hopefully your healthcare team are working with you to help you maintain that for as long as possible. And there's some great evidence for saying, gardening helps us all live longer, be happier, la, la, la. So hopefully we can help you with that. Okay. But if you're here tonight, go, okay, how do I start learning to pace myself? I'm going to go through, I've kept it to 5 steps. Again, it could be 10 steps, so I've tried to just keep it to 5. And then again, we'll have some time for questions and maybe some examples at the end. So when you're looking at what you might like to be able to do more of, the first step is really being able to explain, firstly to yourself, and then definitely say to any health practitioners you might be working with, like, what are the things you want to be able to do more of? Okay. And, we talk about SMART goals and all of that, but actually spending a little bit of time reflecting on that's really important. So saying things like cook more, although of course I can picture someone cooking. Again, that statement might mean very different things to different people. That might mean, being able to stand up for 3 hours and cook for 20 people. It might be, I want to be able to cook better for myself. So it's important to try and tease out what that actually looks like for you. Okay. And although tonight I've kept it a little bit more around physical things, but I think one where we can also use pacing is around cognitive tasks. So being able to concentrate or being able to complete tasks that require mental energy and focus. You can also apply pacing strategies to those things as well, because again, we know different medications or different conditions can also impact your ability to do those sorts of tasks as well. And that can impact your work and cause some anxiety as well. So being really clear with yourself, what are the sorts of things you'd like to be able to do better or be able to do more of consistently, and being as specific as you can is very helpful. Because without the specifics, then when we're figuring out the numbers and how we work towards that, it can be a little bit trickier when we don't know what the goalposts are. Okay, so having a bit of direction, very helpful. And often, of course, I work with clients, it's not just one thing, and that's okay. I'm all for lots of goals and lots of things, because again, if you've had to reduce lots of things, you're going to want to get back into doing the things you enjoy. So that's fine to have multiple aims, but then we'd need to prioritize them. And again, in terms of how we might prioritize multiple things, so let's say you want to get back into gardening more, you want to be able to increase your time at work, and you want to be able to increase your ability to do chores and clean up the house. There's no right or wrong with how you might prioritize those. One thing I'm mindful of when working through that with clients is there are some tasks that are just physically more demanding than others. Okay, and they might take a little bit longer to build up than others. So we can sometimes go for the low-hanging fruit first. What do we think is going to be that little bit easier to see some progress and work towards first? That's an option. The other option is based on your enjoyment. If you're like, I'm really upset or I'm really sad because I'm not able to do X and it's really impacting my mental health and that's really bothering me, then maybe we'd pick the thing that's most important to you first. So there's no right or wrong, but having some priorities is important, because again, when you're trying to improve your ability to do multiple things, of course, best case scenario, you're working on increasing all of them nicely at the same time. But the reality is sometimes you might have to go, this week, I really need just to focus on my number one priority. And I've decided it's gardening, or I've decided it's X. So having that clear in your own mind is very important. And having that written down somewhere also can be very helpful, because it can then help you communicate with other people around you. That's a big part of pacing as well, working with the people that you live with, work with, etc., and being able to communicate what you're working towards is also very important. So step one, what are your aims? Make sure they're clear. Step two, this takes a little bit of work. This is a little bit painful, but there's benefits to doing it. So this is all about finding your baseline. Again, this is something that changes. You don't have to do this all the time, but where I would recommend recalibrating your baseline, or best case scenario, if I got to sort of, work with people exactly as and when worked well for me, I would think, if you've gone through a recent diagnosis, if there's been a big change to your medication that's impacted how you feel, if you've even moved house, which has totally changed your routines and how your symptoms might be impacting you, those are key times where you might want to reestablish what your baseline is. Okay. And trying to do this with openness, with kindness to yourself is also very important, because I find that the process of doing this can be very difficult at times, especially if you're finding that, it's very different to what you used to be able to do. So working through that with clients comes up a lot. I used to be able to walk for 60 minutes, or I used to be able to do this great trek with friends, and now I'm struggling to do 10 minutes. And we do appreciate that it's very difficult. But having that good read on what you can cope with is the first step. So this involves taking a bit of a diary, doing a bit of an audit on yourself. And although I don't necessarily recommend people do this all the time, some clients find that helpful. So you might find keeping a symptom tracker or an activity diary ongoing is really helpful for you. But definitely at the start, and when we're trying to help you build something up, having a good feel for your baseline is very helpful. So it just represents what's the amount you can currently do without a big flare in your symptoms or feeling like you go through that crash. And it might take a little bit of trial and error to figure that out. Some tools can help. Again, feel free to pop in the chat. Things are changing all the time. So I find, I don't know if I'm getting old, I am probably, but just an old school writing it down, a very simple diary. We've got one, I made a few years ago at BJC, but there's other variations. That can be the easiest, simplest way. But yes, there are apps. There's obviously, there's new rings, there's smartwatches, there's different ways you can kind of get information around how you're coping, how you're sleeping, and having that somewhere that you can access easily and input easily is important. And I normally recommend, if people do that for a week or two, just doing it for a day is not that helpful. All of us go through different patterns and ups and downs during a week, during a fortnight, but usually 1 to 2 weeks will give us enough info to sort of see, right, how are you coping? What are you actually doing? And where might be some opportunities we can start to help you improve. So that's step 2. Find the baseline. If you haven't done it for a while, this can be very important. And this can be applied to all activities. So this can be done for high level activities like running, playing sport. It can be done for things like showering, preparing a meal, getting changed. So there's no limit for how you might apply some of these concepts, which I think is why one of the reasons why pacing is so important.
So you've just finished watching part 1 of one of our recent educational events. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you'd like to access part 2, then you need to sign up for BJC Connect. It's a free platform where you can access not just the recordings of past events, but also access a whole range of upcoming future events and access our team of facilitators live. All of the details that you need to join BJC Connect are now flashing up on your screen. But otherwise, like our staff, subscribe if you'd like to see more information from BJC Health. Look forward to seeing you in an event soon.